Look around your life for a moment. Not your successes, your remains, the abandoned notebook, the online course stuck at 37%, the instrument you swore you'd master, the business idea that almost lived, and somewhere under all of it, a quiet accusation. You're inconsistent, you lack discipline, you never finish. So you internalize the shame. You call yourself scattered, unfocused, a jack of all trades, master of none. But what if that voice is wrong? What if the thing you've been trying to fix is actually the most advanced survival system your brain could build? Most of the shame you carry isn't yours. It was installed. At some point early in life, you were taught a rule that sounded responsible, logical, and mature. Pick one thing, stick to it, don't drift. That rule wasn't evil. It just belonged to a different world. For most of the 20th century, society operated inside what psychologists call a kind environment. In a kind environment, the rules are stable, feedback is fast, and cause and effect is predictable. You do X, you get Y, like golf. Practice the same swing long enough, and performance reliably improves. That's the world specialization was built for: factories, linear careers, lifetime employment. In that environment, depth was everything. Dig one hole, dig it deeper than anyone else. The reward system made sense. But here's the problem. Your nervous system evolved to detect reality, not nostalgia. And the reality you live in now is not kind, it's wicked. In a wicked environment, rules change mid-game. Feedback is delayed or misleading. What worked yesterday can actively harm you tomorrow. Entire industries rise and collapse within a decade. Skills decay faster than credentials can validate them. Your brain knows this. Even if you don't consciously articulate it, your limbic system is constantly scanning for volatility, uncertainty, instability. And when it detects those signals, it does not push you toward deeper specialization. It pushes you toward range. So when you feel restless, when you lose interest after reaching basic competence, when you suddenly pivot towards something completely different, that's not lack of discipline. That's threat detection. Your mind is saying this system is fragile, don't overinvest. But instead of recognizing that intelligence, society pathologizes it. They label you unfocused. They imply you're afraid of commitment. They compare you to people who appear more linear, more certain, more successful. Here's what they don't tell you. Specialists only look strong in stable environments. In unstable systems, they are brittle. A hyper-specialist ties their identity, income, and sense of worth to a narrow slice of reality. When that slice shifts through automation, outsourcing, regulation, or cultural change, the psychological fallout is severe. We see it all the time. Burnout, identity collapse, existential panic disguised as midlife crisis. Your brain is trying to avoid that fate. By refusing to go all in on a single lane, you are unconsciously hedging against collapse. You are distributing risk across domains. You are behaving less like a career planner and more like an evolutionary strategist. And evolution is ruthless, but it's not stupid. Across biology, systems that survive volatility share one trait: adaptive redundancy. They don't optimize for maximum efficiency in one condition. They optimize for survival across many conditions. That's what your curiosity is doing. Every time you explore a new domain, you're not starting over. You're collecting mental models. You're expanding your internal map of how the world works, and those maps compound. The tragedy is that the education system, corporate culture, and social comparison metrics all punish this behavior. They reward early clarity, not long-term adaptability. They mistake speed for direction, so you internalize the judgment. You assume something is wrong with you, but psychologically speaking, your behavior makes perfect sense for the environment you're actually in, not the one people wish still existed. This is why forcing yourself to specialize often feels like suffocation. It's not because you're lazy or afraid of effort. It's because some part of you understands that locking yourself into a narrow identity is dangerous. The anxiety you feel when committing too deeply isn't a character flaw. It's an alarm. And like all alarms, it becomes unbearable only when ignored. Once you understand that you were evaluated by the wrong rule set, the shame starts to dissolve. Not because you suddenly feel better, but because the story you've been telling yourself no longer fits the evidence. You weren't failing to commit. You were refusing to overfit your life to a world that no longer exists. And that distinction changes everything. From the outside, your behavior looks inconsistent. You dive into something with intensity. Learn fast, absorb everything, then suddenly you're gone. New interest, new obsession, new direction. People call this flakiness. They say you can't stick with things. That interpretation assumes your mind is wandering aimlessly. It isn't. What's happening is pattern acquisition, not distraction. Human cognition operates on two levels. The first is procedural, skills, habits, repetition. That's where specialists live. They get very good at doing the same thing in slightly better ways. The second level is conceptual, models, abstractions, principles. This is where generalists operate, and it's where your curiosity is aimed. Your brain isn't asking, how do I get better at this? It's asking, what is the underlying structure here? Once that structure is extracted, your interest naturally declines. Not because you're bored, but because the learning curve flattened. The novelty signal drops. Dopamine decreases. Your nervous system moves on. This isn't laziness, it's efficiency. Psychology calls this mechanism far transfer. Most people rely on near transfer. They learn something in one context and apply it to a similar one. Same rules, same environment, same outcomes. It's safe, predictable, limited. Far transfer is different. It's the ability to take a principle learned in one domain and apply it to a completely unrelated one. And here's the key. Far transfer only emerges in minds exposed to diverse, non-overlapping systems. That's why your interests look disconnected. Music, fitness, coding, psychology, mechanics, philosophy. To a resume reviewer, this is noise. To a cognitive scientist, it's signal. Each domain trains a different pattern recognition circuit. Rhythm teaches timing and anticipation. Strength training teaches progressive overload and recovery. Coding teaches systems thinking and abstraction. Psychology teaches incentive structures and human bias. Individually, none of these make you the best. Together, they create cross-domain leverage. This is how novel solutions appear. Most breakthroughs do not come from deeper expertise in one field. They come from the collision of ideas that were never meant to meet. The problem is that society cannot easily measure synthesis, so it pretends it doesn't exist. This is where the imposter feeling comes from. You are not incompetent. You're just playing a game with invisible scorekeeping. Specialists can point to credentials, titles, and years enroll. Their value is legible. Yours isn't until the moment it's indispensable. That moment usually arrives during complexity, when systems break, when environments change, when old solutions stop working. That's when pattern synthesizers step forward. And notice something important. Your curiosity is selective. You don't randomly dabble in everything. You're drawn to systems, things with internal logic, feedback loops, and emergent behavior. Even when the surface level activity changes, the underlying structure you're learning is often the same. You're studying how systems grow, fail, adapt, and stabilize. That's not accidental. It's your BRI. N, building a meta skill, the ability to learn new systems faster than others, and in a volatile world, that ability is more valuable than mastery itself. But here's the psychological trap. Because your learning doesn't follow a straight line, you interpret progress incorrectly. You measure yourself by milestones designed for specialists, certifications, promotions, public recognition. Meanwhile, your real progress is happening in the background, quietly, internally, invisibly. You're building a lattice, not a ladder, and ladders are easier to explain, so you doubt yourself. You think if I were really smart, I'd stick to one thing. No. If you were optimized for the last century, you would, but you're optimized for uncertainty. Your curiosity isn't a flaw to be disciplined out of you. It's a strategic response to complexity. The mistake is not having many interests. The mistake is never learning how to integrate them. Once you understand that, the shame dissolves and strategy replaces it. You stop asking, why can't I commit? And start asking, what pattern did I just extract? And where can I apply it next? That question turns chaos into direction. And direction, once aligned with reality, is power. If you're honest with yourself, this is the wound that hurts the most. You don't feel useless. You feel inferior. You watch people who are clearly the expert. They speak with certainty. They have titles, credentials, and social proof. And somewhere in your mind, A quiet verdict forms. I'm not deep enough. That judgment becomes identity level. It follows you into conversations, meetings, and decisions. You hesitate to speak even when you see something others don't because you assume depth equals legitimacy. That assumption is false. Depth and value are not the same thing. Depth is narrow competence. Value is leverage. Modern psychology and systems theory make this distinction painfully clear. Systems do not fail because of a lack of specialists. They fail because specialists cannot see beyond their silo. That's where you come in. Your mind doesn't naturally tunnel downward. It moves laterally. It compares, contrasts, and connects. It asks different questions, not how do I optimize this variable, but how does this variable interact with the rest of the system? That's synthesis, and synthesis is cognitively expensive. It requires holding multiple mental models at once, tolerating ambiguity, and delaying closure. Most people avoid this because it's uncomfortable. Specialists don't just choose depth, they choose certainty. You choose complexity. That choice comes with a psychological cost because synthesis produces insights before it produces credentials. You see patterns early, but you can't always defend them with authority markers. You sense outcomes before others do, but your language doesn't always fit the dominant framework. So your confidence erodes, not because you're wrong, but because you're early. S is why synthetic thinkers often feel like imposters. Not because they lack skill, but because their skill isn't easily ranked. You can't stack your ability on a resume bullet point and say, this is why I'm valuable. Yet, ironically, when systems reach a breaking point, your ability becomes obvious overnight. Consider how organizations actually solve hard problems. Not by asking the most specialized person in the room to think harder, but by bringing together people from different disciplines and asking someone to translate between them. That translator is you. You understand enough of each domain to see where communication breaks down, where incentives clash, where solutions in one area create failures in another. That's not shallow thinking. That's structural intelligence. But here's the psychological trap that keeps you stuck. You measure yourself by depth milestones in a world that increasingly rewards integration outcomes. You ask, am I the best? When the real question is, am I essential? And synthetic thinkers are often essential long before they are celebrated. There's another layer to this. Your discomfort with claiming expertise isn't humility, it's accuracy. You see how much context matters. You understand how quickly certainty collapses under new information. That awareness keeps you from over-identifying with a single role or label. Specialists can afford to be arrogant. Synthetic thinkers see too much to pretend certainty. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you epistemically honest. The danger is that without a correct frame, honesty feels like inadequacy. So you hold back, you defer, you let louder, narrower voices dominate, and the system loses something critical, someone who can see the whole board. The shift happens when you stop asking, why am I not the best at one thing? And start asking, what can I see that others cannot because they're too deep inside their own tunnel? That question reframes your identity from deficient specialist to strategic synthesizer. You stop chasing depth for validation and start cultivating integration for impact. And here's the paradox most people miss. Synthesis is only possible because you went deep multiple times. You didn't skim life. You excavated it, just not in one place. Your depth is distributed. That's why it's invisible to shallow metrics in undeniable and complex situations. Once you accept this, the imposter syndrome begins to loosen its grip. Not because you suddenly feel confident, but because your self-evaluation aligns with reality. You were never meant to be the sharpest tool in one drawer. You were meant to be the one who understands how the drawers connect. And in a world defined by complexity, that role quietly determines who actually wins. Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they misread time. They assume progress is supposed to look like a straight line, steady, upward, uninterrupted. One skill, one identity, one trajectory. Anything else feels like regression. That belief quietly destroys people with complex minds because your mind doesn't grow in lines. It grows in cycles. If you don't understand this, you will exhaust yourself trying to become everything at once, and exhaustion always masquerades as incompetence. Here's what's actually happening. Your cognitive energy is finite, not metaphorically, neurologically. The brain can only allocate deep focus to a limited number of systems at any given time. When you try to build multiple pillars of mastery simultaneously, the nervous system fragments. You don't fail because you're incapable. You fail because you are overloading the system. That overload creates a specific emotional profile, constant guilt, low-grade anxiety, and the sense that you're always behind. You're working, but nothing feels finished. Effort increases, confidence decreases. That's not laziness, that's misallocation. People with M-shaped minds require a different operating model. Instead of linear progression, they progress through seasons of obsession. A season is a bounded period where one domain gets priority access to your cognitive resources. Everything else is either maintained at a low level or deliberately paused. This is not quitting. This is sequencing. The mistake is believing that pausing something means abandoning it. That belief comes from linear thinkers for whom stopping is failure because their identity is fused to one track. Your identity isn't fused, it's modular. So when you try to maintain every identity at once, artist, entrepreneur, analyst, athlete, you collapse under the weight of self-expectation. You don't need more discipline. You need temporal strategy. Serial mastery is the solution. Serial mastery means going deep in one area long enough to extract durable skills, mental models, and confidence, then intentionally shifting focus when the returns diminish. This isn't indecision. It's optimization across time, but psychologically, this triggers fear because society rewards continuity, not coherence. They trust people who never change their mind. They promote people who stayed in one lane. They mistake consistency for competence. So when you pivot, even intelligently, you feel exposed. You worry you're starting over. You aren't. You're carrying forward invisible assets. Every completed season leaves residue, ways of thinking, tolerances, instincts that permanently alter how you approach the next domain. That's why your later learning curves feel steeper than they should. You are not learning from zero. You're stacking foundations. The critical discipline here isn't sticking with something forever. It's deciding when a season is complete. Completion doesn't mean mastery. It means extraction. You've absorbed what that domain had to teach you for now. Staying longer would produce diminishing returns or psychological stagnation. This requires honesty because quitting and completing feel identical from the outside, but internally they are different experiences. Quitting is avoidance. Completion is saturation. People who don't understand this confuse burnout for failure. They push harder instead of shifting phases. Eventually, their motivation collapses entirely. You don't burn out because you were doing too little. You burn out because you're doing too much simultaneously. Once you accept seasonality, something subtle but powerful happens. Guilt disappears. You stop apologizing for not keeping everything alive. You stop measuring progress weekly. You start thinking in years, and when you think in years, patience replaces panic. Here's the uncomfortable truth. M-shaped lives don't look impressive early. They look scattered, delayed, under-optimized. But over long timelines, EY compound brutally. Linear thinkers peak early and plateau. Seasonal thinkers accelerate later and keep adapting. This is why people with complex minds often feel behind in their 20s and oddly calm in their 40s. They finally see the pattern. They realize nothing was wasted, just staged. Once you understand this, your job changes. Your job is no longer to figure out your one thing. Your job is to protect the current season. Say no to distractions that don't serve it. Let other interests rest without guilt. Trust that they will return, richer, deeper, and better integrated. Time stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes an ally. And when that shift happens, burnout loses its grip because you're finally moving in harmony with how your mind actually works. Most people build their lives like glass, efficient, elegant, fragile, one role, one skill stack, one identity. It looks strong until pressure is applied. Psychologically, this is dangerous. When your income, status, and self-worth are fused to a single domain, any disruption becomes an existential threat. The nervous system responds accordingly. Chronic anxiety, overwork, fear of change, resistance to learning anything new. This is not ambition. It's vulnerability disguised as focus. Nature solved this problem millions of years ago. In biology, redundancy is not waste. It's survival insurance. Critical systems are duplicated, sometimes triplicated. If one pathway fails, another compensates. This is why some organisms survive extreme conditions while others collapse under minor stress. Your mind operates under the same rules. A life built on a single specialized skill is efficient in calm conditions and catastrophic in volatile ones. And volatility is no longer an exception. It's the baseline. Your many interests, skills, and competencies are not distractions. They are redundant systems. Psychologically, redundancy changes everything. When you know deep down that you can pivot, your nervous system relaxes. You negotiate better. You take smarter risks. You don't cling to failing situations out of fear. That's not confidence. That's felt safety. Most people chase safety through stability, the right job, the right industry, the right title. But stability is external and therefore uncontrollable. Redundancy is internal. It travels with you. If you are only a software engineer and automation disrupts your role, your body reacts before your mind can rationalize it. Cortisol spikes, identity shakes, decision-making degrades. But if you are a software engineer who can teach, repair physical systems, communicate across cultures, and learn new domains quickly, the same disruption registers as inconvenience, not catastrophe. You don't panic, you reconfigure. This is the psychological advantage of redundancy. It decouples your survival instincts from any single outcome. When survival isn't threatened, your cognition sharpens, fear narrows thinking, safety expands it. This is why people with multiple competencies often appear calmer during chaos. It's not temperament, it's architecture. And here's the critical point most people miss. Redundancy does not mean mediocrity. It means robust competence across systems. You're not trying to be the best at everything. You're trying to be good enough at enough things that no single failure can end your trajectory. That's how anti-fragile systems work. They don't just resist shocks, they learn from them. Your past dabbling wasn't unfocused exploration, it was stress testing your adaptability. Each new skill expanded your sense of what's survivable. And survival awareness shapes behavior. People with no redundancy cling to toxic jobs, bad relationships, and collapsing identities because they have no exit. Their fear is rational. They have no buffer. You have buffers. That's why you feel restless when trapped in a single role. Your mind knows that dependency is danger. This also explains something subtle, your discomfort with prestige paths. High-status positions often demand total identity capture. Long hours, narrow specialization, reduced autonomy. For someone without redundancy, this feels like success. For you, it feels like exposure. Your resistance isn't immaturity, it's risk assessment. When you understand this, shame disappears. You stop trying to justify your past to people who value efficiency over resilience. You stop explaining why you didn't stick to one thing. You were building an internal safety net while others were betting everything on one card. And here's the long-term advantage. As environments become more unstable, economically, technologically, culturally, redundant individuals gain leverage. They adapt faster, negotiate from strength, and avoid identity collapse. They don't just survive change, they use it. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means setbacks stop feeling fatal. You recover faster, you learn quicker, you move forward without dragging fear behind you. That's what real security feels like, not certainty, capability. So the next time you look at your diverse skills and feel the old guilt rising, remember this. You weren't wasting time. You were building psychological insurance. You weren't unfocused. You were preparing for a world where rigidity breaks and adaptability wins. And in that world, people like you don't just endure. They remain standing when others collapse. Psychology and evolutionary biology agree on one truth. Adaptability beats optimization in unstable environments. The modern world is not kind. It's wicked. Rules change. Feedback is delayed. Certainty is impossible. In wicked systems, narrow optimization fails. That's why M-shaped thinkers quietly outperform over time. They don't race upward in straight lines. They build lattices. They don't chase titles. They accumulate optionality. They don't panic when change arrives. They've been preparing for it their entire lives. So if you feel behind, scattered, or misunderstood, pause. You may not be late. You may simply be early for a future that hasn't arrived yet. And when it does, people like you will be ready. That graveyard of half-finished projects, it's not evidence of failure. It's a record of experiments. You weren't wasting time. You were gathering leverage. You were building a mind designed for chaos, not comfort. You were never meant to be one thing. You were meant to connect things. And the moment you stop apologizing for that is the moment your life starts making sense.